Sutra of Karma Law Awareness. Freedom is the ability to want what you truly desire. This is the best path to health, happiness, and harmony. One day, a former student contacted me and asked for my advice. At that time, he was the head of administration for the central district of a city and had excellent chances of becoming mayor. Before we started working, we talked about life. He shared how much he loved his wife and child, how much he enjoyed teaching, how he wanted to write a book, and how he dreamed of playing with his grandchildren. That's why he decided to focus more on sports, swimming, and generally leading a healthy lifestyle. The next morning, we met again, and his mood had shifted. Now he was focused on how to become the new mayor. I reminded him of what he said the day before, about his dreams and desires, and how much happiness and energy I felt in that conversation. Yes, he could absolutely become mayor. He had more chances than the other candidates. But I told him that to do so, he would have to set aside, if not completely forget, everything else that was truly important to him. Your resources are here, with your family. All your energy is here. By choosing a career, you are essentially abandoning this. And the unconscious mind will not forgive such a betrayal of your true desires. For about 6 months, you'll survive on the energy of novelty, new people, new processes, a new position, a new office, a new scale. But after 6 months, you'll start noticing you're getting sick more often. 6 months later, you'll realize you're stumbling on flat ground, suffering sprains and fractures. Then your heart will start to fail. And if you still don't recognize the signals your unconscious is sending you, it might resort to extreme measures and just switch you off. Freedom means responsibility. That's why most people fear it. George Bernard Shaw. This is how people are made. If the unconscious realizes you're not moving toward your true goal, it first tries to stop you, and then it might just turn you off completely. Even if you achieve some results, you will feel unhappy if those results don't align with your true purpose. The unconscious does not forgive such things. Therefore, the ability to want what you really want is the ability to understand what you need, not what others expect. It's about finding your own zone of happiness, listening to internal signals. This applies to everything: choosing food, a path, a life partner, a profession. Even sex fulfills its emotional and psychological functions only when it is entirely sincere, and a person can realize all their dreams in a relationship with their partner. The issue of aligning desires with possibilities is one of the most important in any human society. On a banal, everyday level, this dilemma is expressed in numerous sayings, often profound in their specificity, from the humorous "I want to buy a car but can't afford it," "I can afford a goat but don't want one," to the famous toast from Kidnapping, Caucasian Style, "Let's drink to the fact that our desires always match our capabilities." Everyone wants freedom. But that's just how it looks from the outside. In reality, deep down, no one truly wants freedom. Freedom is like mountain air. For the weak, it is unbearable. Rinashoka Kutagawa. A horse has plenty of oats, yet it longs for freedom. Golden freedom is dearer than anything. However, the ability to align your desires with those of others, to define and outline the circle of what is allowed, goes beyond clichés and anecdotes. This skill became one of the key moral practices in all major religious and ethical teachings of the world at the dawn of civilization. From the attempt to curb the boundless desires, in which the carnal nature of man is most vividly expressed, comes asceticism, the monastic feat in its various manifestations. From these same attempts comes the philosophical reflection on the relationship between freedom and desire. What is freedom? According to Sigmund Freud, freedom is the ability to want what you truly want. To achieve freedom is to learn to feel and understand your desires. Consider an interesting experiment. A group of people was asked to copy a phone book for 20 minutes. Half the group was told they could refuse if they didn't want to do it. The other half was simply ordered to complete the task without being offered an alternative. After completing the task, participants were asked to evaluate the experience. Those who had been given a choice but chose to participate rated the task 9.17 out of 11. This suggests that people feel satisfaction when they choose for themselves. The second group rated the same task 2.17 out of 11, showing that restricting freedom of choice makes any task unpleasant and robs people of satisfaction. To be free means being without compulsion, open to alternatives, not constrained by a single or fixed course of events, wrote American psychologist Joseph Ricklack in his book The Study of Freedom, Desire, and Responsibility. People feel free when they can freely change their action plans, reconsider their views on reality, and adopt new evaluation algorithms. Those who exercise the freedom of desires are confident, responsible people who clearly define their problems and consciously take the right steps to solve them. These people can manage emotions and understand others. Freedom is the nourisher of all great talents. Like divine inspiration, it purifies and enlightens our souls, it breaks the chains of our minds, expands them, and lifts them above themselves. Therefore, give me freedom to know, freedom to express my thoughts, and most importantly, freedom to judge by my conscience. John Milton. No matter how many gates you close, the horse still longs for freedom. A person who realizes the freedom of desires lives by the scheme, desire goals responsibility. For a free person, this scheme is flexible, constantly changing, never static. When a person is freed from thinking patterns, new perspectives open up. Patterns no longer weigh on them, and they become better at recognizing ways to achieve their goals. Their knowledge of society and themselves expands. They begin to understand themselves better, define their desires and internal resources, and plan more effectively. According to Ricklack, if a person can understand the reasons for their actions, take responsibility, evaluate and modify their current and future goal-setting programs, they are free not only in their desires but also in their actions. Desires arise very often, but most disappear after a little reflection. Our logic finds facts that point to the unreality or unnecessary nature of a specific desire. Interestingly, this reasoning process is almost absent in children. That's why a child, after 3 servings of ice cream, might want a cake, but after eating just a small piece, realizes they no longer want it. Adults are more critical of their desires. I can't, I don't need to, what will my friends think? It's too early for me. These are the objections that arise. And it turns out that while people may claim to want many things, they often can't express their true desires. A golden cage is no delight for a nightingale. A man needs just one thing, the independence of desire, no matter what that independence costs or where it leads. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Freedom is worthless if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. Mahatma Gandhi. The actions of any person, or what physiologists call conditioned reflex activity, down to the smallest details, are always driven by their needs. The unique composition of a person's needs is primarily based on their genetic, hereditary structure of needs and predispositions. Motivated by various needs, a person is always occupied with the most pressing one at any given time. From the perspective of physiology, this is called a dominant need. According to the prominent Russian physiologist A. Ukhtomsky, among the reflex actions that can be performed at a given moment, some represent the greatest interest to the organism, meaning they are the most important at that moment. Therefore, these reflexes are realized, while others less important are inhibited. Ukhtomsky called the centers involved in realizing dominant reflexes the dominant focus of excitation. This focus is persistent, difficult to inhibit, and the intensity of its excitation suppresses other potential dominant focuses. For example, finishing work may be important to us, but if we haven't eaten all day, this dominant need will increasingly make itself known, as hunger poses a greater potential threat to the body than postponed work. All dominant needs can be situational, driven by an acute necessity, practical, requiring some time, more or less, or vital, the most stable of all needs a person may have. Fulfilling one's deep, vital needs is always accompanied by positive emotions. The feeling of happiness that arises when we meet our needs is an indicator that we are on the right path. However, when we are forced to engage in tasks that are not aligned with our personal dominant needs, the situation resembles what Napoleon once said: many misfortunes on earth arise because people are engaged in work not meant for them. A great tailor languishes as a talentless man of science, and a brilliant barber suffers in a ministerial chair. Man is the master of his own fate in the sense that he has the freedom to manage his freedom. But to what end this will lead is unknown to man. Mahatma Gandhi. Better for a bird to be on a green branch than in a golden cage. Freedom is a luxury not everyone can afford. Otto von Bismarck. At a philosophical level, the problem of the correlation between desires and possibilities was already recognized by the pre-Socratics. It is hard to fight with the heart, every desire is purchased at the price of the psyche, remarked Heraclitus, continuing, it would not be better for people if all their desires were fulfilled. Socrates directly addressed the ultimate task for humanity by formulating the famous thesis, know thyself. Nes te ipsum, understanding this as a call to recognize one's true desires to attain genuine freedom and moral perfection. Through the Stoics and other philosophical schools of Hellenistic Roman antiquity, these ideas of Socrates would be absorbed by later eras. Saint Augustine, reflecting on the problems of will as desire, noted, it is enough to want to go, and you are not only on your way, you are at your goal, but you must want with all your heart, not vacillate with a half-sick will where one desire struggles against another. Not always can a person, behind trends and stereotypes about what they should want, see their true desires. Not always can a person discern their true desires behind the trends and stereotypes about what one should want. This is because modern consumer society increasingly relies on mechanisms for actively shaping demand. According to the theory of the renowned American economist John Maynard Keynes, the founder of Keynesian macroeconomic theory, the state not only can, but must stimulate demand among its citizens through special measures to prevent or at least mitigate economic crises, which inevitably occur periodically in any country. In Keynes' view, the main driver of the economy is demand, which must be shaped by all available means from aggressive advertising to the formation of a mass consumption ideology. For a moral being, there is no good without freedom, but this freedom is not given by a sovereign or a parliament, but by each to themselves with God's help. N.M. Karamzin. Freedom to the free. A bird values its will more than a golden cage. What is called freedom in one case is called licentiousness in another. Marcus Fabius Quintilian. Postmodernists Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari argued that modern people are not only imposed with needs but also with desires themselves, through the economy with its arsenal of advertising and promotion of brands as a way of life. These authors even coined the term the machine for the production of desires to emphasize the suprasubjective, automated nature of imposition. Is it possible in such conditions to find freedom, to realize one's own, rather than implanted, desires? It is quite difficult. It requires significant reflective and, most importantly, creative effort. Not accepting ready-made decisions but creating your own is the reliable path to gradually freeing oneself from the web of imposed needs and desires. As one of the classics of French structuralist philosophy of the second half of the 20th century, Roland Barthes, asserted, there is no other way to become original than to first master existing behavioral patterns perfectly. In religious terms, freedom is considered an element of divine essence granted to man. In Islam, human freedom can be viewed from various aspects, the most important being religious freedom. In the Quran, a person is given the right to freely choose the religion they believe in. There is no compulsion in religion. Quran 2:256. This suggests that Allah has prepared a path for each person. Along with freedom of choice, a person also bears full responsibility for their actions. No soul shall bear the burden of another. Quran 35:18. In captivity, there is no happy fate. One who is free is the one who can avoid lying. Albert Camus. If a person did not desire, there would be no person. The cause of all activity is desire. Leo Tolstoy. Freedom leads to captivity. The famous saint of the undivided church, Blessed Augustine, Augustinus Sanctus, 354–430, who laid the foundations of Christian culture, wrote about different levels of spiritual perfection that regulate our desires as follows: great is the freedom to be able not to sin, but the greatest freedom is to be unable to sin, and the will within us is always free, but not always good. The Talmud says, everything is in the hands of heaven, except the fear of heaven. The sages saw the conflict arising in our consciousness between the belief in the omnipotence of the Creator and the essential postulate of human freedom of choice. Their answer seems at first to reduce human freedom to their internal world. But this is only a superficial perception. Fear of God is indeed a component of the inner world of a person, but through it, the gates to a broader world are opened. The Creator of the world, the only possessor of true freedom in this world, shared this freedom with people. According to some Talmud commentators, this is the meaning of the notion that man is created in the image of the Almighty. Human freedom stems from the fact that they are given commandments, and thus they must freely choose between good and evil. Buddhism does not divide desires into good and bad, but warns us against losing awareness and control over our aspirations. When we are hungry, thirsty, or cold, our desires for food, water, and warmth are natural and positive. Our desires for friendship, companionship, beauty, creative power, and productive outlet of our energy are also positive. To end all desires would be to condemn oneself to a life of stagnation. But it is important to understand where the fine line lies between healthy desires and neurotic dependence. For example, if we overeat, it is not because our body requires nourishment. Perhaps we seek more comfort in food because we lack love or have low self-esteem. But food cannot bring us either, and overeating will only complicate the process of getting what we truly need. Realizing this is the path to freedom from this dependency, and it is the first step on the path to spiritual growth. First, freedom when there is plenty of bread. Wings are freedom only when spread in flight, behind the back, they are a burden. Marina Tsvetiva. Freedom never comes from the government. Freedom always comes from its subjects. The history of freedom is the history of limiting governmental power, not increasing it. Thomas Woodrow Wilson. The full freedom of heart and mind at the highest possible levels is the goal and object of Buddhist life and practice. One day, Buddha said, "Just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so my teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom." This is the ultimate goal, if you will, the culmination of Buddhism, the taste of complete spiritual freedom, freedom from our dependencies, as is often mentioned in Mahayana. Isaiah Berlin once wittily remarked, "The freedom of an Oxford professor is something quite different compared to the freedom of an Egyptian peasant." A person is free in their choice and desires only within the boundaries defined by society through laws or moral prescriptions. But it is through social stereotypes that we drown out unconscious signals from ourself, from our path. Deceiving oneself is a terrible absurdity. Why believe in stereotypes? There are many of them, and they mostly contradict each other. Because at some point, it turns out that you dreamed of something not yours, not what you truly wanted. However, if we listen to our subconscious, many things will align themselves into a straight path toward our true desires. To live consciously is to remember where you are going, without losing sight of the present. Elchin Safarli. A free bird flies wherever it wants. To recognize responsibility is to recognize that you are creating yourself, your destiny, your life's troubles, your feelings, as well as your sufferings. Irvin Yalom.